Kirk Whalum, how you doing?
And I'm doing great, Sean. It's good to hear from you. I appreciate your patience. And, here we are in Soulsville, uh, the place where rhythm met blues.
Yeah. So how's your family doing?
Excellent. I appreciate it, man. It so happens that my wife, Ruby, and I, my girlfriend, who I met when I was 15, we end up with the pandemic with three of our adult kids and three grandkids here at the house here in Memphis. Man, it was just something that we never would have figured it. It was meant to be. But that's where we are, man. So we are eight people in my house. Thankfully, house is big enough to deal with it. And over here in my studio, which is above the garage, it's kind of an oasis. Like a 2-year-old and two 4-year-olds, they reign over there in the house. They're the bosses.
Yeah. So I was trying to think of. Okay, so first we have a few people in common. So first and foremost, Dr. Ted McDaniel.
Beautiful man.
Yeah, he's
Beautiful man.
been a great mentor of mine, and I owe a lot to him.
Yeah, yeah, I love that brother, man. He's just he's a big brother to me.
And let's see here, Hamilton Harden.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and Kevin Turner.
All right, all right. So those my Ohio connection.
Yes, and those are folks that I talk to them all the time.
Hmm.
We have so much in common. We can talk on all kinds of different topics and
Hmm.
things. Great musicians,
Oh man,
and
two of the very best, man.
yeah,
I
and
aspire to I aspire to anywhere close to being a Kevin Turner or a Hamilton Hart. I just like having them around. People think, oh wow, you're that good too. No, but I got them all over here.
okay. So I was thinking about, of course, you, thinking about my introduction to you, to your playing,
Hmm.
and it was probably that solo you played on that Whitney Houston song.
Hmm.
You know,
I will always love you.
yeah, I will always love you, which I can hear every note of in my head right now as I'm talking to you. It's been
Yeah,
such a ubiquitous. I mean, it's just so ever present,
yeah.
and you've been just tremendously influential as a player. It's hard to hear anybody that has any kind of smooth jazz sensibilities, gospel sensibilities, just not, at least in some way, sound like you. The way that you sound, the way that you speak through the instrument, the nuance, the sort of the nuance, the making the saxophone sound like a human voice. You know, you just, yeah. Something that's interesting is, so Gary Sugel.
Uh-huh.
That's someone else that we have in common.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I started playing his mouthpieces years and years ago, and I went away from it. I went to Van Doren, and I'm still kind of with Van Doren, but he made me a custom piece, a custom tenor piece. And so the first mouthpiece I played for him years ago was a KW2,
Yeah.
and
That's a
I
good
was like,
mouthpiece, man. I didn't have
X.
anything to do with it, except you know what I mean, just trying out different mouthpieces and finding the one that spoke to me, and yeah, so he named it after me, and I loved it, and I sort of played it until like you just get to the point where you evolve, and I've done that a few times. I started out on a Berg Larson, man. I mean,
Mm,
so I've evolved a whole lot, you know, because now I'm playing a Jody Jazz hard rubber mouthpiece, and you know, there are times when I wonder what would I sound like now on one of those other mouthpieces. Just like I just don't have time to, you know, to experiment with them. But it's all good. Everything has its place, and everybody sort of has their identity. You
Mhm.
know, I think it's like, what are you going for? You know, just while we're talking about mouthpieces, you know, I always talk about my favorite. You know, you can go through Ben Webster, the Colin Hawkins, Arnett Cobb, you know, Lester Young. You can go through all those guys and talk about their sound. Like that. That's the sound that, as far as I'm concerned, like we all should be trying to get. But there's a guy named Plas Johnson, Plaz Johnson, who played my favorite recorded solo to date, and that is the solo on Marvin Gaye, "If I Should Die Tonight."
Mm.
And so the sound that Plas Johnson gets on that record is pretty much the sound that I'm going for. I mean, I model my playing after singers. Like I never really like the influential players initially, you know, were alto players, right? I mean, especially you know, Hank um uh what am I trying to say? Um I just completely spaced out on his name. Really, from Memphis, Tennessee. I'll get his name in a second. I played at his funeral. Hank Crawford. You know, Hank Crawford was my guy, right? But so the
Yeah.
sound that I heard on the saxophone didn't kind of evolve from other saxophone players. It evolved from gospel singers because I was in church. My musical world was in church, you know, like 90% of the time. And then the rest of it was listening to the radio. I didn't necessarily go to clubs as I was too young until I started playing these gigs at different clubs, blues, you know, juke joints. So my sound reference is has always been Deborah Manning Ingram. Like that's a name that you may not know, but she's Memphis royalty when it comes to being a gospel singer. Like she is the gospel voice, and that's the sound I hear from the very beginning that I've wanted to try to cop. But in terms of saxophone, when I was old enough to kind of know, you know, I started listening to Wilton Felder, Ronnie Laws, and Grover Washington, right?
Mm.
But still, even with that, if I had my way and I could just flip a switch today, I would sound like Plas Johnson on Marvin Gaye, "If I Should Die Tonight." And that solo is all of, let's see, I think it's 4 bars, man. It may be 8 bars, I guess, depending on how you're counting it.
Mhm.
But it's like those are the most precious notes to me that have ever been played on the saxophone. They're sacred, you know, and it just speaks of the black experience. It speaks of our connection with God, with our Creator. It's just a sound that just washes over me, man.
You know, speaking of playing in church, so your brothers are ministers.
Yes, my younger brother only recently, Kevin is a singer. You know, I mean, I
Hmm.
would say quintessentially, you know, Al Jarreau, Bobby McFerrin kind of strain of singer where he sings instruments.
Right.
You know, that's really his forte. But Kevin also accepted a call to the ministry about 10 years ago now. And yeah, he's not pastoring, neither do I. But our older brother, Kenneth, pastors the church we all grew up in, Olivet Baptist here in Memphis. Where are
And
you?
you,
What town are you in?
I'm in Columbus,
Yes, sir.
Columbus, Ohio.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
All right. No wonder Kevin Turner's mayor there, isn't he?
Yeah, he ought to be. And you have a master's degree in theology.
I do. From Memphis Theological, one of the very best theological seminaries in the country.
So, I mean, it's like you're saying that growing up and hearing the music in church has
Hmm.
been very influential in your playing. I mean, I can hear that the first note.
Yeah.
You know, in anything that you play, it's like it's all saturated in there. And I was talking about my first experience with your music,
Hmm.
you know, like before I was even really even thinking about. I wasn't even thinking about saxophone per se. I had been playing because of when that song came out. Because I see, when did I start? So I would have started playing in 1980,
Mm-hmm.
and but I was thinking Whitney Houston, and here's this saxophone solo that just totally, just kind of hit me on the side
Mm-hmm.
of the head.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first experience. But then years later, I saw you at an IAJE conference,
Mm-hmm.
and you did a master class, and any questions that I had about you were totally put to rest because the first thing that you did was you played giant steps. And it
Mm-hmm.
was just you.
Right.
You played giant steps and then you started talking to us. And I was like, okay, this guy can really play. It's not just about the sound, the tone, and placing the notes correctly,
Mm-hmm.
and going for the emotion. This dude can play a pile of saxophone,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so impressed by that, and that caused me to really lean in and pay closer attention to what you were doing. Of course, all of us church saxophone players love the gospel according to jazz
Yeah.
recordings,
Oh yeah.
which are yeah, such. What caused you to? How did you? What caused you to think of doing that project? What?
Yeah. So I always talk about the band Koinonia. That band was Justo Almario on saxophone, Alex Acuna on percussion, Hadley Hawkinsmith, Harlan Rogers, Abraham Laborio, and I don't think I'm leaving anybody out. But yeah, that band also accompanied a group called Seawind, and but Koinonia means fellowship, and all those guys were LA studio musicians who wanted to make a statement, an instrumental statement in the mainstream industry. Uh, you know, for Christ to say that we are believers in Jesus Christ, and we want to share our faith with the world, and in a way that's unique. And man, it was groundbreaking. My friend Marvin Abair and I, we were just man, just in college, just freaking out on Koinonia. But um, that registered for me. So then when I got to a point where I was now making records and out here following up behind Spiral Gyra in particular, and other bands and other acts like that, again the Crusaders and Ronnie Laws, and um, I got down the road, and I was on Columbia Records. I'm a Columbia recording artist, man. What more can you ask for? And then one day, man, I got unceremoniously dropped like a hot potato, man, from that label. It was like, I mean, just matter of factly, oh him, oh no, my manager was calling about a meeting, blah blah. Blah. I was like, oh, they didn't tell you. That's how we found out I
Oh
was dropped
man.
from the label. And so man, it was such a traumatic moment for me, and a lot again, trauma. What is that? If you think about the things that are truly traumatic in life, that ain't it. But it was definitely to my ego, and me feeling like man, I've arrived, and this is where I always want to be, and then boom, now you're not. And I remember distinctly, my wife was there when I got that call, man. And at the time we were living in Nashville. We had been living in LA. We lived in France for a while and all of that. So now here we are. And she says, okay, it's something she caught me before I had a chance to go full pity party. That's the thing about knowing someone so well. And she said, what can you do today that now that you're not a Columbia recording artist, that you couldn't do yesterday when you were, or you thought you were a Columbia recording artist? And man, what she basically flipped the whole thing to where now the creative onus and the initiative, the agency was on me. Like I had a choice to make. I could either pout or I can say, now, what is it that God would have me to do right now? And what do I want to do? And the answer to that was easy. I didn't think it would be that easy. It's like, actually, I just got off this tour with Rochelle Farrell, George Duke, and Jonathan Butler. And when we would go on stage, just somehow on one of the concerts, somebody broke into, I guess it was Jonathan, broke into a hymn, and then George started playing, and then Rochelle started singing. I started playing. So now so we're playing Precious Lord or something like that, and the crowd went berserk. So it was the highlight of the whole night. So then, of course, it became part of the show. And I said, man, people are hungry to hear from us on this. Like they want to know that you trust in God, or that what is your spirituality? Where are you? You know, are you willing to go out on the line and say, no, this is my faith. I'm a Muslim. I believe in this, or I'm Jewish, and this is what my upbringing and my faith tradition. Are you willing to go on the line? And the answer to that was yes. For me, I am willing to step out there and say, I love Jesus. And so how can I do that? And so we came up with this project, a live project featuring somebody who is not known as a gospel artist. And it was Jonathan Butler, it was Paul Jackson Jr., it was Layla Hathaway, Shalea, on and on. And the idea of it was to not be, a Christian or a gospel record per se. But my ex-manager came up with this title, The Gospel According to Jazz, which was great because at least that way it speaks to this is the sonic version of what the good news ought to sound like, or at least from our vantage point.
Mm.
And you know we believe that God speaks the language of music, that people can hear the voice of God in their hearts without comprehending some lyric in their head. That God can literally speak to us through music. And so again, I can't take credit for it. I saw Coin O'Neill do it years before, and Justo Almario is still very, very, very bad. And he's a good 12 years older than me, maybe more. He may be around 73, 74. I need to look that up, but man, that band was amazing.
Yeah, those recordings have been really influential to me, and and even more than just being influential on maybe choices that I would make. It's time well spent. I always feel better,
Mm,
after I listen.
thank you.
So so I heard that you speak French and Spanish.
Oui, je parle français. Y sí, también yo hablo español. Sí, es la verdad.
Unfortunately, I don't speak those languages. Uh,
Porque no, porque podemos continuar, seguir en otro lenguaje, but, or not.
but so you lived in Paris.
Yes, sir. Nous avons vécu sur Paris dans le 15e. We lived in the 15th, the 15e arrondissement. That's, Paris is split up into these neighborhoods that go in a kind of a spiral, and they're numbered. And so we lived in the 15th, which is right next to the 8th, as it were, because of the spiral. And the 8th is where the Eiffel Tower is, La Tour Eiffel. So when my kids went to school, they walked across the Champ de Mars, which is a field of, I don't know, Mars Field is basically what that means in French and English. Right across to where you're looking at the Eiffel Tower right there, and then their little bilingual school over
And you started on bass. So
there.
bass was your first instrument.
It was just because I was trying to get my hand on anything that made music, and it just so happened that my dad was and mother both were in the postal system,
Mm.
executives, in fact, and my dad was somebody in the office. He told me, man, that boy wants to play music, and so He said, "Man, I got an old bass sitting up in my attic. I'm gonna bring it." So he gave it to me, and it was a K bass, which is all the bass players in the house said, "Man, you got a K bass? How do you even keep it?" And yeah, man. So I learned Willie Weeks solo, and I learned whatever I could. And by the time I was getting sinking my teeth in, I got that alto sax from the public school system here in Memphis, man, and it was all over. And my friends are all right now are about the same age. We have the same story with our wives. We've been together almost 40 years. And Gerald kept that bass up, man, and he's an incredible bass player. And he's not the only one. I mean, Marcus Miller plays incredible saxophone and bass clarinet. So not to mention Hamilton Harden, it's like I just don't get how they got. I am having a hard time trying to master these instruments. Like this is as far as I go, man, as far as like stepping away from saxophone. But I have a lot of admiration for those guys, man. I can do that. I'm a slow learner, man. You have to know your pace of learning. And for me, I know that I just posted something last night where I learned this solo from Robbie Coltrane on the song. It's his dad's song 26-2. But his version of the song's hard anyway. But his version is in basically 9/4. But it's like it's not a consistent 9/4. It's like switches around 5/4, 4/5, 4/5, and it's fast. It's at 280. I think it's at 285. That's the tempo.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
quite a bit faster than Coltrane's tempo. Yeah.
yes, sir. And
Yeah.
so, man, yeah, it took, I'm gonna say conservatively 4 months to learn that solo. I mean, to where I could play along with him. And see, to me, that's the type of thing I like doing, man. I just always want to be reaching. These young brothers set the bar so high, and I just feel like I want to spend my days reaching after one. I can't do all of it, but at least I don't ever want to be satisfied with what it is that I do. There are some things that I do really well because it's sort of intrinsic to me, my particular gift, as it were. But I never want to be satisfied with that. I always want to try to be reaching. I have this acronym S2, ASTWO, always something to work on. And you can also read it as two. Like when we play, we are playing representing not just ourselves, the recipient of the gift. We're playing representing and incorporating the very spirit of the giver of the gift. So it's two. They're hearing two entities at once. That's two.
That's the power of tradition.
That's another part of it. you know.
So when exactly? So how old were you when alto saxophone got in your hands?
12.
So you were 12,
Hmm.
and
Now by 14, I was full-fledged tenor player.
yeah. So when did you know that okay, this music thing? I think this might be the thing for me.
Yeah. So when did I know it? Right. So that's a good question because like I never really didn't know it. It's like
Hmm.
I always say, I can imagine the doctor, pulling me out and spanking my hiney and tell him, presenting me, congratulations, Miss Webb, you have a baby musician. you know, that's just the way I look at it. I think there's certain ones of us, we're, hopelessly musicians. My son is like that. My son Kyle, he plays bass with Kelly Clarkson, and he's also playing a lot with Katy Perry right now. But he's that type of person. Like he was a musician from day one, and there's just some of us that are like that.
Yeah, I never. I don't know that I ever made a decision either. It was just always what I wanted to
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
And it was a situation in my household where my dad was a great saxophone player, and
nice.
I would hear him playing around the house, and and he was a record producer, and so he had a studio and all of that kind of stuff, and so I was just kind of encountered. I mean, it just kind of we just came together. Like I don't even remember. I don't even remember. I mean, the story goes is that I had been sort of bugging him about teaching me saxophone, but he didn't. he didn't really listen to the first few times or the first several times that I said that because he wanted to make sure I was serious.
Yeah.
And so then, and of course I don't remember any of this because I was too young to most of that I don't remember. I interviewed my father in this same interview series, honestly, to answer a bunch of questions about his philosophy on the kind of things he had me practicing, and to fill in a lot of gaps because I just don't remember certain things. But one thing I do remember is that it's the only thing I ever wanted to do. Music is it, and I'm stuck with it. Like, I don't know, like I would be so miserable if I had to do something else.
I hear you. Yeah, man. That's how old is your dad?
My dad is 70.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's incredible, man. Wow, what a beautiful legacy. And I guess this is the type of thing that I share with my son. And I have two kids, two sons and two daughters, all of whom are awesome. I have, my nephews play, and my uncles and aunts. It's this diagonal line. My grandmothers, both of them. So yeah, that's a really beautiful thing. I mean, for you to be able to say that. My dad was a pastor, and he was not a big music fan. Period. I mean, he liked gospel. Of course, I love gospel music. Yeah, that for sure. But other than that, he wasn't really that guy. But all the other things, I have a big picture of him over here. But the other things in my life that between him and my mom, and I'm so grateful.
So you were talking earlier about practicing, and you just mentioned practicing just now.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of what is it? What does your practice routine look like?
Well, so obviously with flute, and it's all about sound and whatever else I can fit in time wise. I practice flute at night, or so long tones and that type of thing. Um, on saxophone, I start out with long tones because really, as Dave Sanborn once told me, sound is everything. And so, the long tones, vibrato. I even have vibrato exercises, that I've used a metronome and that type of thing. I don't always do those, but that's something that I've done over the years. Secondly, man, scales and scale exercise. James Moody, I had a lesson with him when I was 19 in Nice, France, of all places. Long story, but he put me on this path of how to dissect diatonic scales in particular, but even chromatic intervals and just mixing and matching these scale intervals in such a way that you're always driving the boat. Like you can put the books down in this sense, and that is that okay. If you start with what you know and continue to make it harder, right? If you know da 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 da, da right? Then play da 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 da, right? And etc. Then you go da 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 da. Then da 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 da, then da 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 da, etc. Right? So you got to constantly be challenging yourself in every single thing you tackle. Again, because you're the boss. You have to make sure that it's harder than what you just did. Like if you did this and you did it in every key and you got it to the metronome and you got the metronome going finally up to a decent tempo, okay, now what you gonna do? What are you gonna change about it? Let's make it melodic minor ascending. And so now instead of playing fourths, diatonic fourths, 3 up and 1 down, now ascending and descending. Now when I say 3 up and 1 down, I'm talking about what James Moody calls the direction of the interval. So if the interval, put it like that, interval is a major third, or the interval is diatonic third, right? 1, 3. Then the next one is going to be 2, 4, and the next one 3, 5, etc. Right? But the question, an interval is the space. It's not the notes, right? So then you determine, all right, what direction is that interval pointing in? Well, it depends. If it goes da da, that interval is pointing up because the lower note is played first. But if I play da da, that interval is pointing down because I played the high note first, and that's critical because once you're gonna build on that little bit of.
I trust that you've enjoyed the video so far. Please subscribe, comment, share, like, and also you can go over to my Patreon. The link is in the description if you'd like to further support. Thank you. Now back to the video.
You're gonna build on that little bit of information. You're gonna build that out through this whole system of scales that God created for us. You know, that is crazy from the bottom of your instrument to the top. So if I'm playing in the key of E, I'm not starting on E, I'm starting on B, etc. And so then, you can just change so many things. Then do it in harmonic line, but you got to do it in every key. And then you take that same thing, you say, okay, well, now let's do that where I play that same exercise over an odd time signature. I mean, there's just so many things you can do. You just have to be really creative with, or you can buy a book. And again, you get the same thing, but when you do it, you internalize it because you sort of discover it. Go, oh, geez, I could do this. Because that's what he was doing. James Moody was showing me this when I was 19, bro. I'm 61. I was 19 and he was showing me this stuff and he was going, oh, wow. He was like, hold on a second. Let me play something different. He's like, oh, dang. Then he's like, forget I was there. I was like, this dude is on a tangent, but he was so excited to discover something new. You're constantly in discovery mode like that. So long-term scale exercises. Then, literature, man. I mean, that's not something that a lot of young musicians are privileged to get into. I mean, I'm so grateful I could go and get private lessons, and then I got with the really best classical teachers, Laura Hunter, Bob Austin, and yeah, literature, man. I mean, repertoire. Learn some of those concerti, learn the sonatas, learn, these Cargilaire etudes and Bozza etudes, and through all that stuff. And I'll dig them back out and I'll go back into them because just constantly, each of those etudes, the word etude in French means study. It's a study on a particular thing. So one kind of interval, or it's a study on chromatics or whatever. I just, posted the Flight of Bumblebee again the other day, something I dug back out and I'm trying to get my fingers back around it. So literature is really important. So that's the third thing. And then again, that just depends on if you're exposed to that. Not everyone is. And, but I'll just say it just makes for a giant leap of discovery when it comes to what it is to be a great musician. Then improvisation, yeah, there's just so much to do with, what scale goes with what chord. There's the theory part of it, right? Then there's the dexterity, there's the muscle memory, there's all those things that go into being a good improviser. Yeah. And that is its own thing. I mean, the Music Minus One, the Jamie Aebersold, all those. Now it's like, oh goodness, back in the day we used to have to go try to find them. There was no online, so you had to find the cassette or find the record, and eventually the CD. But now you can just go on YouTube and just type in Jamie Aebersold, and there it is. Or there's so many other people who are making that type of thing. In fact, I just finished a tool called Session Band, the Session Band app. If somebody goes to my Facebook page, they'll see it, but or my website. And then Session Band, created by some English people. Yeah, you can basically have me on your record, like, because there's all these high def, at least for it to be an app, clips, loops and stuff of me playing along with this fat rhythm section from England, and all these different styles. And you could just take it and paste it and tape it together and like have your song, and mute me and you play, or you can have, if you play guitar, you can have your record featuring me. It's like, it's a really cool thing called Session Band. So in other words, the improvisation part of it involves now utilizing the technology in such a way that builds your muscles. You're a very muscular cat, so you did what I'm saying. Musical muscles. Right. And then the fifth thing is listening. You just try to listen to as much diverse music as possible. A lot of cats think, well, just listen to bebop. Well, that's important, but man, I was just listening to some Tejano music, some incredible Mexican musicians. It's just into this new mariachi band that's like incredible soulful singer and traveling, man. It's just, man, my new record Humanite is about that, about doing collaborations with young artists from Indonesia, Japan, France, Nigeria, Kenya, on and on. And so, yeah, that's about incorporating, learning from, and incorporating those styles and those ideas into your music.
So you just mentioned your latest recording. Uh, is there anything else that you're either currently working on, or other projects that, or maybe a project that you had intended to be working on right now, but because of the state of the world,
Right.
you've kind of put on pause?
But it's just the opposite, really, because I'm here in a studio, right? And I'm grateful
Mm.
to have a studio in my home and, um, behind my home. But absolutely, I'm just finishing a Christmas record, but because of the pandemic, it'll be put off until next year. But we did the work, and I've got just a little bit more work to do, working with a British producer named James McMillan. But the Humanite project is kind of all is like it's all about that right now because we just finished, kind of getting it set up internationally, or we're in, sort of increasingly internationally, and you know, and the number one artist in South Africa, Zahara, number one artist in Indonesia, Afghan, on and on. I mean, this record was a life project, and it's something that I have wanted to kind of morph into this kind of TV show where we like Anthony Bourdain does what used to do with food, we do with music. Like go to these different places and experience their culture through the lens of their music, whether it's Israel or Palestine or in this case Kenya and South Africa. So yeah, that's really it right now. I mean, there's some things I'm working on. The session band app is something I'm actually doing a lot of stuff with right now, just because it's brand new and a lot of people are interested in that. Um, but yeah, those are the things. I mean, I could mention some stuff, but it's all stuff that it's not even in the oven baking yet. But kind of in the queue. Gospel according to Jazz Chapter 5, by the way. That's something, another something I got to get around to.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm eagerly awaiting that.
Thank you, brother.
You like my? Do you like my peer-reviewed T-shirt?
Man, I'm checking you out, the number one dad, man.
Yes,
Uh,
it's peer-reviewed. You
Oh,
know,
that's awesome. How many
it's.
kids you got?
I just have the one. He's 6. His name's Moses.
Okay. All right. I'll get the peer review. I like that, man. That's awesome.
Peer-reviewed.
That
Yeah.
is
So yeah,
awesome.
they got in a room. A bunch of other dads got in a room, and they
Right.
voted on it, and then I
Yeah.
emerged
Yeah. I mean,
as the number one.
and you got the shirt. I mean,
That's right. That's all that matters.
that's too cool, man.
Yeah. It's like the greatest thing being a dad,
Yeah.
and there's not. It seems like a cliche that musicians are not always the greatest dads. Like they're on the road all the time. They don't have, they don't take the time out. They don't prioritize their family, or, their kids or whatever. And it's always great to kind of highlight people that did it a different way, that really
Yeah.
put their put their kids first. And
Yes.
I certainly try to do that. And I think about my dad. You know, my dad was my dad has done such a fine job, and I always feel like if I do half of what he did, my kid will be fine.
Yeah, man. I ascribe to that, and you're a blessed man, brother. And so am I on both sides, having a great father and hopefully, trying to be that for your kids. And it's a lifelong challenge. I used to take my kids on the road, by the way. Each one of my kids got to go on some Whitney Houston tour, when
Oh, wow.
certain age, just so happens I think it was 8. I think it was 8 years old. They got their week on the road and that type of thing. But man, I am gonna play my flute now because if I don't, I'm gonna fall asleep and I will
All right.
stay, and that's not good.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time and energy. And yeah, I'd like to bring you to Ohio State sometime.
Oh, what a privilege that would be, man. Do you teach there?
Yeah, I'm the director of jazz studies.
Wonderful.
And yeah, and so we have an annual festival.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, we had to cancel the 43rd annual, which was supposed to be this past March.
yeah.
But it's a festival that happens every March, and I always have a headliner that we bring in. And so, at some point, I'd like to bring you in, maybe teach some master classes, and play a concert. That'd be
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, it would be my honor, man. So, anytime, just keep practicing over here.
All right, all right, man. Well, God bless you,
Yeah, same to you, brother. Thank you very
and
much.
and happy flute practicing.
Thank you, man. Take care. Tell brother Moses I'll get to meet him later.
All right, have a good one.
Ciao.